So, quite a week we've had. Thousands of people converged in the Capitol. Let's just start with to protest. To protest what? It became a riot, clearly. It was violent, undeniably, and people were killed. But why did people go there? That's the issue, really. Why were they there? What was the goal, etc.? Well, two friends of mine, a Christian married couple, went. They were there. And I spent some time over the past hour arguing with the wife that it was reprehensible, I say, of the people there to do what they did. Her argument was the media is lying to people and that she was there and it wasn't as violent as the media is making it out to be. And it wasn't about the numbers that the media was claiming. There were only a few people who were doing bad things. I think she's delusional, as I've told her, and here's why. The reason there were thousands of people there is, I think at this point, undeniably because they were lied to for months on end, if not longer, in direct, unequivocal terms. There was no election fraud. Those of you who are thinking there was, and when I say election fraud, I'm talking about widespread fraud, not some individual person doing something that they then got caught for doing and shouldn't have been doing. The widespread fraud that Trump has relied upon to foment this kind of riot at the Capitol didn't happen. It never occurred. Part of the obvious proof that it didn't happen for rational people is Trump's insistence that it was going to happen, though it had never happened before. But because of his polling, he knew that he was in trouble. And months and months and months, probably a year or even a little more, prior to the election, Trump kept warning about what was going to happen, that he made up completely to defend himself because he's a reprehensible, self-centered narcissist who is frightened to death about being out of office. It's a very, very scary situation to me, this idea that many people voted for this absolutely incompetent boob. But that's okay. More people voted for Biden, and Biden will be sworn in on the 20th. I'm not here to argue Biden's suitability. I don't care. I'm here to point out again and again and again the absurdity of the confidence that the people who protested and then rioted at the Capitol have in these ideas that aren't based on anything real, that are absolutely deluded. So, in other words, this is what happens in a cult. You have a leader in whom you believe, and you believe things that are unbelievable, that aren't real. And that leader gains more and more strength and more following and more power. It's a sad, sad state of affairs, but that's what's gone on here. The numbers notwithstanding, it doesn't matter. Just because there's such a sizable number of people who believe these things does not make any of them true. So to go very slowly here, if there were any evidence whatsoever of any kind of widespread fraud, we would all know about it, we would all have seen it, and in fact, there has been none. And that has been reviewed and confirmed by Democrats and Republican officials across the nation. More than 60 court cases have looked into and found not even sufficient evidence to bring standing in some of the courts, but anytime they've gone into court, they've been the issues have been tossed or negated because the evidence didn't exist. So it's not about there being some and people having the right to be angry that this happened, but there's nothing we can do about it. None of that's the case. There was no widespread voter fraud, period. Biden won this election fair and square, and all of Trump's rhetoric has been destructive and dismissive of all that we have held dear for centuries in our democracy. It's not even surprising to me anymore. But here's a piece that will, I think, be somewhat controversial that I want to toss out as part of this. I'm convinced that the lubrication for these beliefs that so many of you hold in following Trump is born in religion. The idea that those of you who believe so strongly in your deity, in your particular religion of the thousands of religions that exist in our world. So for the most part, in this case, we're talking about Christians who believe in a God. Those of you who are Christian and believe in a God have become accustomed, you have learned how to have confidence in something without evidence, without what I believe is necessary to rationally have confidence. So yeah, you could say, oh, that's just your belief hatch, da 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 da. Sure, but let's explore it a little bit. We don't know for sure, we say, whether there is anything supernatural, that whether supernaturality is a figment of our imagination, something we need to comfort ourselves, whether it's something humans have developed for whatever myriad reasons. And we've developed all kinds of religions, if that is the case, to comfort us. Regardless, those of you who have chosen Christianity as the religion you're going to follow, and I say the word chosen loosely because I think you've been indoctrinated, most likely. The majority of you came from Christian parents. If your parents and your families had not indoctrinated you into those beliefs, they aren't the beliefs that you would have today. So that in itself is interesting, I think, and tends to point toward the lack of there being some kind of independent evidence that what those beliefs hold dear have some kind of validity. To me, they don't. But setting all that aside, whether they do or not, the idea that that many of you who are religious hold those beliefs so strongly, with such confidence, live your lives or try to live your lives according to these beliefs of a particular religion, I think that is what has set you up to believe some of the absolute, unequivocal, I think incontrovertible nonsense to which you've been subjected by this orange moron. So the idea that you have been able to concretely conclude that there is a deity and live with confidence that that's true I'm saying, has enabled you, has lubricated the process for you to believe things like that there was election fraud, that Donald Trump is somehow competent, that there are pedophiles in pizza parlors, and other examples ad infinitum of the crap that's been spewed, I believe, in order to hold you to him for selfish, narcissistic reasons, for his fear of what life will be for him when he leaves office. Donald Trump has never been a success. All of his businesses have failed, and miserably. And he has treated people poorly all along the way. It's not about choice, even for him. It's an incompetence. You can read about his niece having written from inherent in him from birth. It's who he is. A desperation, a psychologically disturbed man who doesn't have a choice about the way he treats people. He's devoid of empathy. And all he cares about is this narcissistic need for self-aggrandizement. It couldn't be more obvious, and there couldn't be a better example, and that's why I'm talking about it. Not because I'm so particularly political. I'm not. I'm certainly, obviously, more liberal than not, given that I'm gay and I'm an atheist, etc. But I'm not particularly political because I don't believe that the political descriptors like Democrat or Republican mean much. I think they change, they waver, and people come to think that they mean things that they don't. And there is far more overlap in what people on the Democratic side or the Republican side believe. I don't think there's any of us who would like as limited a government as we could have, a smaller government. And people think of that as a Republican idea. No, Democrats would like as small a government as is reasonable too. We just need to talk about what is reasonable. We're not socialists because we who want some assistance from a government think that that's reasonable. There are extremes, and people tend to label those extremes, but I think most people are more in the middle. And so Social Security, for example, is something I think most people believe is a good thing for a government to have in place to protect its citizens in their older years from struggling too hard, or for life to prevent life from being too difficult in those years. And there are all kinds of things along the way. We can talk about health care and et cetera. But those are all political discussions and conversations. My point is that the idea we consider ourselves one or the other is not of great value, I don't think, particularly anymore, because that thing that people believed about either one of those parties is not necessarily true anymore. As soon as Trump came into the picture, Republican beliefs shifted. And those who are Republican have gone along with him, many, because that's what they have always believed. That party is who they always have been, and their families have been. But it doesn't make a lot of sense. If the ideas behind that party or in that party's leadership change, then why wouldn't a rational person ask themselves whether or not their own beliefs have changed? And that's more where I stand. I don't care what the labels are. Let's look at the ideas, the concepts, and evaluate them as one-offs each time something comes up. Otherwise, we find ourselves where we are, almost engaged in a war where people are storming the Capitol, breaking glass, suffocating people, crushing people, people are killed, the officer who was killed, and it's just evidence of our stupidity as human beings. If we step back rationally, just even a little tiny bit, the only reason those extremely violent people who were doing most of the damage might want to get in is to harm those people who were inside. It isn't about protesting, as so many of those people who were there believed. If it were about protesting, you could be outside the Capitol and get just as much media attention without the negative attention and, it looks like now, criminal prosecution for the damage, destruction, and lives lost. So I wish we were a more rational species. What good is wishing? I don't know. But I do continue to talk about this, and I'm passionate about it because I believe, as I've said over and over, reality matters, or it should. And reality, what's true, is somehow becoming less and less important, less and less pursued by the majority of us. And when that happens, I think we lose more than most people have put the time into thinking about what we've lost. It's a scary, frightening concept for me, the idea that we stop caring about what's true, consciously or unconsciously. I mean, even if you don't know you're doing it, if you've lost sight of valuing reality, what kind of a world does that signal we're headed toward? Where are we now? This is a kind of a crazy time to be living in when life is as precarious and we are so polarly opposed in these big groups politically. And what does that say about how we're going to move forward and work together? Is that possible? Can we step back? I don't know what to contribute other than to ask people to be a little bit more concerned about whether they have the skills to think critically. And if they don't, to care about the fact that they don't have those skills enough to get training, to learn how to think more critically, so that they aren't duped by people with bad intentions and used as pawns towards some self-serving end. The world has been filled always with snake oil salesmen and con men. And I'm convinced that one of the biggest, most incompetent, least respectable men in our history somehow landed in the presidency. And the damage done will be a long time overcoming if we're even able to do that. But I think it starts with you as an individual asking yourself whether or not you're capable of sufficiently thinking critically to prevent yourself from so confidently asserting things, facts, supposed facts, that aren't true. Living as if the things that are being spoon-fed to you by bad actors are valid when they aren't. Thank you, sincerely, for listening to my videos. Please subscribe. It's free. And please comment. I really do read your comments, and I do try to respond. If you have any ideas about what more you'd like to see or ways in which you might be interested in partnering, feel free to reach out. Thanks again very much.